Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove. Well, welcome to the show. We're all just kind of changing seats here as Perry is away, and he will be back. Steve Johnson here with you, and we're with a person who, if you have been listening to the Dove Radio for a long time, and even the Dove TV, you will know Nisha Jackson. She's a medical director of Ventana Wellness, and she's our guest for the next 45 minutes. And we've also got another special guest, but I just want to ask you a question. Have you thought of all the chemicals in our society? I think sometimes we perhaps experience them, but don't really realize the toxic impact that they can have on our lives. We're going to be talking about that in 3 segments right here. Nisha, it's great to have you here. Welcome back.
Thank you, Steve.
Toxicity. I know that you have hit on that quite a few times on the Dove Radio show. How prevalent is that in our society from your observation?
Well, it's very prevalent. In fact, there's 70,000 chemicals being used commercially right now, and only a handful of them have been tested.
Wow.
Which is a problem because we know that so many of them, approximately 200 out of the 70,000, and probably many more because they haven't been tested, are causing hormonal disruption in people.
And I know that's a key thing you focused on quite a bit. Now, let me just mention that Nisha is the medical director and the head of Ventana Wellness. In case you're wondering, she's from the Valley area here and has been around a lot. And we've talked about that toxicity. And it reminds me of what you were saying is that we tend to think the government has tested every chemical that's out there. They know what's going on. And then you'll have like the Food and Drug Administration. Somebody will blow the whistle and they'll say, okay, we need to study that. And then they say, oh, yeah,
right.
You know what? I think we've got a problem here. So it almost sounds like we've got a little bit of a toxicity problem that way.
A little bit of a disconnect.
A little, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So how many, again, give the stats?
There's 70,000 chemicals being used today commercially. And only a handful of them have actually been tested to really know that what their toxicity level is. Yeah. But about 200 of them have already been shown to cause hormonal imbalances. And a lot of people say, well, what's that?
What is it? Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
So what that means is, I always say it makes the men be more like women and the women be more like men, which is kind of frightening when you think about it, right?
That puts a whole nother level to it all.
Yeah. So really what it works on is it causes a hormone disruption in the body because these chemicals often mimic estrogen in the body. So it changes the pathways that hormones work in the body, but it also elevates estrogen because it attaches to those receptor sites as if it was estrogen and raises those levels. So for men, when their estrogen levels go up, it means their testosterone levels come down.
Oh.
So that's a problem because they gain more fat around the middle, they become more emotional, they lose their zest for life, they have problems with fatigue and depression. And for women, that puts them more at risk for breast cancer, ovarian cancer. It causes uterine fibroids. It can lead to exaggerated PMS or early menopause. Again, weight gain and hair loss for women. So that's the problem with the hormone disruption part of these chemicals. But there's also other things that are happening. If you are exposed to a lot of these chemicals, which are very common, in our plastics, in our canned foods, in the sheets that we're sleeping in that are laced with formaldehyde. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can get these chemicals in your system, right? Breathing them, sleeping in them, wearing them, eating them, drinking them. The problem is that we have found out more recently is that these toxins actually get trapped in our cells. It's specifically in our fat cells. And those, unfortunately, what happens is that it's almost like an autoimmune response that can be created over time because our body starts attacking those toxins. And then we get this internal fight going on, which has led to a real significant increase in autoimmune disorders for men and women, but very much so for women, more for women than men.
Now, I would assume this happens over time, and so that may be the sneakiest part of it, where it's not like one day you wake up and say, I feel a little more feminine or masculine or whatever it might be. I mean, this is something that over time, it's in your fat cells. All of a sudden, you end up with these symptoms, and you probably have a hard time identifying exactly what it is.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because in 2005, there was a study done on the umbilical cord blood of newborns. And they found in the umbilical cord of newborns up to 287 different industrial compounds.
Whoa.
Toxins.
That had gone through the mother
Yes.
While the child was inside and all.
Exactly.
And impacting the child in the womb.
Exactly.
Wow.
And so we're passing this on generation to generation. And now some of what we think is a genetic predisposition to something may be a toxic overload that's carried from the mother to the fetus and then down the chain. The other thing that came up in my research over the last couple of years is the University of Washington, Washington State University did a study, and they looked at the toxic overload that actually came from 2 generations prior.
Oh,
so
yeah?
it's really interesting to see now that we can have several generations that we can test. They looked at it can not only be passed from mother to fetus, but on down the chain. So they really are tying that to genetic disorders now.
And probably we're seeing the elevation of toxics in our society from those generations.
Yes.
Because generations ago, there was virtually none, I suppose, and now it's increased
Well,
so much.
I think maybe multiple generations ago, we didn't have as many as we do now.
But 2 or 3 wouldn't be that long ago, would it?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
So the good news about that is that there's something we can do about it. We can start finding out what are some of the things that we should be avoiding, getting ourselves educated, and making some changes that might make a big difference in the long run, especially for the people down the line, our children and their children.
You know what you're talking about? We think of crack babies, mothers who've taken crack and how it impacts the baby directly.
Right.
Yet some of these other areas, maybe we haven't thought of toxic babies, smaller amounts of other chemicals that are also having an impact as well. I mean, if it can happen with crack, I suppose it can happen with other chemicals.
Yes, well, that would be one extreme, of course,
Right.
of a toxic overload or a toxic contamination. But I think people would be very surprised. In today's program, we're going to talk to an expert in this area that really was one of the leading experts in identifying what some of these toxins are in our everyday household products, and exposing that and being able to get more research going in that area. There's a wonderful website called Environmental Working Group. The actual website name is ewg.org, O-R-G. And the Environmental Working Group is really dedicated to testing some of these chemicals to make the public more aware of what they're putting in their body, what they're putting on their body, especially even if you think about lotions and creams and perfumes. All of those have a toxic base to them, and many of them with compounds like formaldehyde in them, which you really don't want to be absorbing through your skin.
Well, and if you've ever read the ingredients, a lot of that stuff, for those not like yourself, but those like myself, who will look at it and say, that's a chemical. And I have no idea what that is, but you're putting it on your skin,
Exactly.
and it's absorbed. We found how even, think of the nicotine patch, things like that get absorbed through your skin, so why not a lotion?
Well, and so many medications that are being tested right now from an FDA standpoint are medications that are bypassing the gut and going through the skin. We have pain patches, we have estrogen patches, we have all sorts of creams and gels that are now being absorbed through the skin for medication. So we know you absorb very well through the skin, and in many cases better through the skin than you do orally. So
really,
I think
I hadn't heard that. It's really it's that far. So we may see more of that through the skin than orally.
We'll be
because the
seeing,
stomach breaks it down sometimes.
It does, and especially if you mix it with other medications. The great thing about the skin is you can absorb so well through the skin. So many of the hormones, the natural hormones that we prescribe in our office, go through the skin because it just bypasses the gut, doesn't make the first pass through the liver, so it keeps your liver a little bit healthier longer. And so that's another advantage of through the skin. But what we haven't really realized all of these years, maybe until more recently, where it's become a lot more publicly known, is that people do absorb all of these toxins through their skins. Even taking baths, you put your children in these baths with all this fragrant bubble baths and all of these foofy things that we put in our bath.
What is it?
And what is it?
Yeah.
And we're absorbing it. So it's really a problem and something we have to look at.
I think of how one could go to the extreme of it and get just probably psycho. I mean, you think of Howard Hughes kind of a mode where he just went off on the other side of it. But I think that there's a balance in the middle to say, well, you don't want to ignore it either. You don't want to just say, somebody made it, so it must be good.
Right.
You really don't even know. I'm wondering if in the effort to have like healthy types of options, like at health foods and all that, if there isn't a concern for what's in some of that as well. Let's say the certain kinds of soap that are totally different. I mean, I don't know what's in some of those oatmeal soap. It might be perfectly good, but again, you probably should read the labels and investigate it. And
I think you're right. I think it's important to sort of keep your perspective on this, because there are some people that go absolutely nutso with this stuff. I mean, it is like they're living in a cave. Right? And I don't think that's realistic for the majority of people out there, right?
Yeah.
To try to be completely isolated from all of these toxins because they're everywhere. And so I don't think that the take-home message will be that you need to try to live in a cave and avoid all of these toxins. I think the take-home message is there's a couple things that you can do that would make a big difference in your overall health. And we're going to talk about some of those things today with our guest, specifically around the home, because a lot of people think about pollution, they think of exhaust. Right?
Yeah.
They think of exhaust coming out of a car or a big truck that's going down the road, but they're really not thinking about all of the household things that they come in contact with, and cleaning products that they're coming in contact with on a regular basis that they could change, and it would make a big difference.
I've even wondered things like new carpet, new furniture. There's always a smell, and you kind of think it must be a good one, but that is a chemical in some way, letting off some sort of chemical exhaust.
Right, and inhalation of those chemicals is a serious way to cause your whole body to be toxic. So that is something, we've told people for years, if you have new carpet laid in your home, leave the home for a week, keep the windows open, air it all out. How realistic is that for most people?
Yeah, you got new
what, are you going to go
carpet?
stay in a hotel for a week? I mean,
After you bought the carpet?
Right,
I don't think so.
But maybe planning a family vacation or something around the time that you're going to get new carpet laid. I mean, I think there's some ways that you can isolate yourself, or just ventilating the home very well. So I do want to make sure we touch on most of those things today, so people have an idea of what they can do without getting crazy. And one of the things, I think we've talked about this before, one of the worst things you can do, and I'm always after my kids, don't do this, and my husband, when you get into a warm car, a hot car, even a warm car, your whole car is plastic. The whole car is really. There's all these plastics and chemicals in your car. Well, when they heat up, that's when they really release the toxins. So the worst thing you can do is get into a hot car with the windows rolled up, and then you know how people do, just turn on the air conditioning. They don't roll the windows down. They don't open the doors. They just turn on the air conditioning, and then they just circulate it and breathe it, till it gets cool.
Because most likely everyone has it on the circulation inside. Don't draw air from outside.
Exactly.
Even. Oh, yeah.
Right. Well, even if they're drawing it from the outside, there's so much toxic exposure inside. And it's really, they're just starting to look at that now from a research standpoint. And it's very concerning. Some of the initial research that's being done on that is that the toxic level goes up 50,000 times in a hot car. So, name to the game, this is easy to do. Roll your windows down. Open the doors, let it air out for a couple of minutes.
That's a great idea.
And slow down. Slow down. That's something I can always try to remember, is to slow down and let your air ventilate in your car.
It reminds me that we tend to think of airplanes saying, oh, you're just breathing the same air all the time. But when you do what you laid out in your car, how many times a day do you do that same type of thing, but with a hot environment? And temperatures are still, if it's 85 now, it could be 95 or 100 inside your car the minute you open it up.
Exactly.
The windows are up.
So just get the visual. Just get the visual when you're doing that of inhaling black toxic stuff that's going to stay in your.
Thank you. I like that thought.
That's going to hang around your cells for many, many years, and you're going to pass it to your kids, and it's going to make you crazy. It really will change brain chemicals too. That's some of the other research they've been doing, is looking at how it affects neurobrain chemicals, and is this something that's maybe tied into depression and anxiety? So it makes you wonder why all these diseases are increasing. I mean, sometimes 5, 6, 20-fold. Something's going on. We have more environmental toxins than we've ever had before. So we know there is some connection. And my hope is that we can give people listening today and watching today some easy steps to take.
Well, we're going to go to that break in just a minute, but I wanted to ask you something that kind of ties in with all of that aspect of it. Air fresheners. Is it, you're spraying it, it smells good, it's
Bad
lilac,
idea.
more toxics.
Bad idea.
Aren't they? So in our efforts to make things smell good and possibly be better, we could be jeopardizing things.
You know what we're going to say today is we have to go back to what great-grandmother was doing. Maybe great for some people. Maybe great-great-great-grandmother was doing.
Wow.
She wasn't spraying all those pretty little perfumed air fresheners.
That's true, yeah.
She wasn't doing it.
She just smelled like it because of her beautiful essence.
That's right.
That was it. Nisha Jackson is our guest during this segment, and she'll be with all 3 segments here. She's a medical director of Ventana Wellness. We're also going to be joined by the author of a book called Toxic Free, and we'll tell you more about Debra, Lynn, Dad coming up right here on Afternoons on the Dove.
Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove. Follow the conversation. This is Afternoon on the Dove.
Well, welcome back. We've got a special guest joining us now as we're talking about how you can live in a more toxic-free environment. Our guest is Nisha Jackson, Medical Director of Ventana Wellness, in the studio. And also via Skype is the author of a book called Toxic Free. It's Debra Lynn Dad. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Hi, Debra. Thanks for joining our show. You know, I am always ranting and raving about trying to avoid the toxic chemical exposure more from a hormone standpoint. You know,
Yes.
my area of expertise is hormone imbalances, and I'm always talking about how these toxins can be hormone disruptors in the body, which doesn't really lead to a very pretty picture.
No,
So
I actually myself have had some hormone disruption from toxic chemicals. After I recovered from my immune system disruption, I then found that I had endocrine disruption, and that's a little more difficult. But every time, I think people don't connect that when they hear in the news the word endocrine disruption, like associated with bisphenol A, they don't understand that that has to do with hormones.
Right.
But that's exactly what it is. And hormones are those little things that run around our bodies and communicate. And so if our hormones are getting affected by toxic chemicals, then everything in our body is going out of whack.
You know, I think it's interesting just your story and how you became such a wonderful consumer advocate for people, and how you became really one of the first people to expose and publicize these chemicals and what they could be doing for the body and maybe not doing for the body. So let's talk a little bit about, just for a second, if you don't mind, a couple minutes about your journey and how you got interested in this, and some of the publications that you have done in this area.
I first became interested in 1978, which seems like a very, very long time ago now, when I was very, very sick, and I had a lot of what seemed like unrelated symptoms. Like I had headaches and insomnia, and I was depressed a lot, and I would just binge eat. I just couldn't control eating at all. And I thought, well, what are all these symptoms? It's not any illness that makes sense to me. And at the same time, my mother was dying of cancer. And my father took her to a doctor who was doing intravenous vitamin C treatments. And while he was sitting there waiting for her, he was watching this doctor give tests to patients where he would give them an extremely tiny amount of a chemical which would turn on a symptom and show that that patient had a sensitivity. And then he would give them some more, like homeopathy kind of, and it would turn off the symptom. And he's looking at these people being tested, and they would get a little bit of chemical and burst into tears or suddenly get a headache. And he said, that's what's wrong with my daughter. Because I would just cry at the drop of a hat for no reason at all. And I was at the point of being physically disabled, that I couldn't work, I couldn't go places. Any place I went, I would get sick. It was just a mess, and I didn't know what was wrong. And so when my father found out about this, I went to the doctor and I got tested, and I was extremely, extremely sensitive. But at that time, nobody knew really, they couldn't explain what the mechanism was. And they also, they called it an allergy, which it isn't. And nobody really had a solution. And so it was finally about a year later that one of the other patients actually said to me, are you still sleeping on sheets with formaldehyde on it? And I said, what formaldehyde? Why is there formaldehyde on sheets? And furthermore, isn't there somebody in the government watching out that there's nothing toxic in our products?
Right. That's always my question.
And so on her recommendation, I went and I found the only untreated cotton sheets that were on the market in 1978, put them on my bed, and it was the first night that I slept. And it was only later, when I started researching all of this in a toxicology book, that I found that one of the symptoms associated with formaldehyde exposure is insomnia.
Wow. And, you know, insomnia certainly is one of those disorders today that is on the rise. The number of medications that we're now prescribing for insomnia has gone up exponentially, even in the last 5 years.
Isn't it like billions of dollars worth of sleeping pills that are sold now?
It's unbelievable.
And what I found, just through my own experimentation, was that as I would go to the medical library and the Poison Control Center and find out, well, what are the toxic chemicals? And then I'd have to go to different books and find out what products are they in. And I was actually the first person who made that connection between symptom, toxic chemical, and product. That didn't exist in 1978. And so as I was making these connections, I would stop using perfume, and I stopped having headaches, or I'd stop having formaldehyde on my bed sheets, and I'd be able to sleep. And it was just one after another like this. It was very, very cut and dried. And I said, if somebody had told me this, all of this suffering that I'm going through physically I wouldn't have had to do it, because I could have just said, okay, I'll use these cotton sheets. I'll use these unscented products. And that's how I started.
Well, Debra, I think what's interesting is that people cannot even fathom that what you're sleeping on, something as simple as sheets, could have anything to do with how you feel physically. I mean, people really have a hard time wrapping their heads around that.
I understand, because I had that same problem in the beginning. It was like I couldn't believe it, that in my own home, where I thought everything was safe, because, you think of home as being that haven where the outside world is dangerous, but your home is safe. And here, to think that my own house, using products that I thought were safe, that are on the shelves in every store in America, that would make me sick, it was unbelievable at first.
Yeah, let me ask you, Debra, do they still put formaldehyde with sheets? Are they still treated that way?
Yes. And here's the thing.
What's the reason for that? I mean, I can't imagine any...
Preservative.
A preservative.
No. Formaldehyde is a preservative. In fact, it's used in all those little gel caps that we all take for vitamins.
Really?
All have formaldehyde preservative, unless they're specifically labeled that they don't.
I feel like I'm being embalmed while I'm alive still.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so if we go out and buy sheets, they'll
go back to sheets for a minute. The reason why formaldehyde is on sheets is because it's in the resin used to make it wrinkle-free. And so all the polyester cotton blend sheets have it, and all the 100% cotton sheets have it that say permanent press or wrinkle-free or easy care. But not all sheets have formaldehyde resin on it. It's coming up on winter now. All cotton flannel sheets do not have it. And I live in Florida, and I sleep on flannel sheets every night of the year. You would think you shouldn't do that in a hot climate, but it actually absorbs perspiration better than regular sheets.
Wow, that's good. That's a good tip. Now, you said in your book, even right in the first part of your book, chapter 2, you talk about the big 5, and I wanted to kind of touch on that before we get too far into the program, because I think that's important for people to know. What are the big 5?
What are the big 5? The first one is cigarettes. I remember that.
Yes.
Cigarette smoke. And the reason why I put cigarette smoke first is because cigarette smoke is so toxic and so dangerous that when it combines, you could clean every other toxic thing out of your house, and if you're smoking, you're still getting more toxic chemicals. And also, when cigarette smoke combines with other chemicals, like an example is cigarette smoke and asbestos, makes the asbestos even more toxic.
Oh, interesting. Okay, Now you also talk about, I want to spend most of the show talking about household chemicals, because that's what your book is about, Toxic Free, is really getting your home more environmentally friendly, I guess, so to speak. Yeah. But you also talked about drugs. You just mentioned the vitamins. People think that they're taking something good, and that maybe they're not taking something natural because maybe it's less expensive, and they're really swallowing formaldehyde, and this is just one more chemical they're putting in their body. And I know even with the prescription medication, we're running into that too.
With prescription medications, many of them are synthesized from crude oil, like a lot of other toxic chemicals, and they are toxic. One of the things that just amazes me, and I know everyone has seen these commercials on TV where they have a beautiful scene telling you how you're going to get your psoriasis handled, or you can grow your eyelashes. And then this other voice comes on and says, and if you are pregnant, or if you have a liver, or if you, and some side effect could be death. You know, it's like all of it. You could just go look at practically any drug, just look it up online and see all the toxic side effects.
And I think I've even seen like a Saturday Night Live routine where they show you, you know, this one thing it's supposed to do, you know, is to prevent ear hair. And then they go through the entire aspect of all the other things that you could die from. And it's like, who would want to take this to begin with? You know, I mean, it's hilarious if it wasn't, I guess, so true.
It is so true. But here's a big important point I want to make. And that is healthcare costs are skyrocketing. And we have all these drugs and all these natural remedies, and we have this mindset where we think people are sick, and then we have to spend money on these products and services in order for people to be well. People are sick because we're overloaded with toxic chemicals. Virtually every person in the world has toxic chemicals in our body. It's been measured. It's called body burden. You can look it up on the Centers of Disease Control website. We all have toxic chemicals, multiple hundreds of toxic chemicals in our bodies, more than our bodies can handle. And if we, number one, reduce our toxic chemical exposure, which is very easy to do, and number two, remove toxic chemicals from our bodies, we don't need those drugs. We don't need all those health services. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have health services or drugs. I'm just saying that we're spending a lot of money to try to relieve something that could be relieved by improving our environment.
Well, you know, Debra, I think it's so important to give people useful tools to make changes, because it gets a little depressing when you start talking about all these chemicals. I mean, you realize it's everywhere, right? It gets kind of depressing. So I am excited.
It is. I don't want people to think that, I mean, we do live in a world where toxic chemicals are everywhere. There's no place on earth that you can go where there's no toxic chemicals. But there are many, many, many consumer products that have much relatively less than other consumer products. And that when you fill your home with those products or make products that are less toxic, it's enough less that it significantly improves your health.
All right.
But really, there is no such thing as 100% toxic nothing in the world today. I titled my book Toxic Free because it's about you as an individual being free from the toxic effects of our toxic world.
I am very interested to hear what you have to say about how we can go about doing that. And the one thing I want you to know is I don't care if my sheets are wrinkled.
I don't either. And I don't care if my shirt's wrinkled.
After you put them on once, I mean, you put the sheets on, you sleep in it, it's wrinkled.
Right.
So.
Right. Who cares? It's not like people are coming through your house looking at your sheets, because your bed should be made.
And when I'm unconscious, it doesn't matter. I'm not there dreaming about wrinkle-free sheets. So
that's right.
We're with you, Debra, on all of this. Debra Lynn
I'd
Dad.
rather sleep than be unconscious.
Yes, that's right. Absolutely. Debra Lynn Dad is our guest. Of course, we're with Nisha Jackson, Medical Director of Ventana Wellness, and Debra Lynn Dad will join us as well to talk a little bit more, author of the book Toxic Free. And I love the subtitle, How to Protect Your Health and Home from the Chemicals That Are Making You Sick. And we are going to continue our discussion right here on Afternoons on the Dove.
Follow the conversation. This is Afternoons on the Dove. Follow the conversation. This is Afternoons on the Dove.
Well, welcome back. We've got a couple guests joining us today. Nisha Jackson, of course, as you know, from Ventana Wellness, a medical director there, as well as via Skype, the author of the book Toxic Free, Debra Lynn Dad. The subtitle of the book is How to Protect Your Health and Home from the Chemicals That Are Making You Sick. And even if you missed the other two segments, we're going to talk this last 15 minutes about how you can improve your life better and make it more toxic free, which is something that's good, and have wrinkle sheets, because who cares if they're not wrinkled? We found out that formaldehyde keeps your sheets on your bed from wrinkling, but when you're asleep, who cares anyway?
Okay,
so live a formaldehyde-free life.
Debra, I have to ask you, because I know that a lot of people are people who listen and watch these segments, they really want to do what they can to get their health back on track. They're probably able to relate to insomnia or feeling chronic fatigue or having autoimmune disorders, or depression or anxiety. I mean, so many people can relate to that. But what are some of the things that we can give them that would be very straightforward, easy tips to follow that would maybe knock off some of the most hazardous chemicals in the home? What are some of the things we can tell them? Just maybe 4 or 5 things.
Well, number one, a very easy thing that everybody can do is to use vinegar and water to clean your windows instead of ammonia.
Amen.
Ammonia is something that our grandmothers used, and so people think that it's safe, but it's not. It's actually pretty toxic, and you can have very bad respiratory problems from breathing it. And if you mix it with chlorine bleach, you'll die because it gives off very, very toxic fumes. So you just take vinegar and water and mix it half and half in a spray bottle and clean your windows with a soft cloth, and there's no ammonia to that.
I actually think it works better than the regular Windex.
I do too.
I think it works better.
True for a lot of things. A lot of these non-toxic things I actually like much better. Another thing that people can do is toss out those Sharpie pens. The ones that have the really strong odor.
Oh, really? Why is
That's
that?
a bummer. I use those all the time.
Yeah. No, these are fighting
I love
words,
my Sharpies.
I tell you. I don't
Sharpies
know.
are so in vogue right now.
What's the problem
Everybody
there?
uses a Sharpie.
I know. They're all over the place. The problem is that they contain toluene and xylene, which are two of the most toxic solvents that there is.
No Sharpies.
And when you breathe in that smell, then it's affecting your nervous system. It's affecting your brain. And I mean, if I take one whiff of that, I can't think anymore.
Wow.
And I think that's happening for a lot of people. There are water-based markers out there. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have markers. Just use water-based ones instead of solvent-based ones.
I'm going to tell you it's not going to be the same as a Sharpie, but I think I can make that switch.
I know. But, over the years, I really got used to these things because in the beginning I was thinking, I'm really sick, and if these things can make me well, and they did, then I want to use these products instead of the toxic ones. And now it's so second nature to me that it's like when I go into a store, I just reach for the cotton clothes and I don't even look at the polyester clothes anymore. It's just like I just don't want them.
Yes.
And everything that I do is the most non-toxic. Even my makeup, you guys can see me on TV here and see how pretty this makeup looks. This is all totally natural, totally beautiful.
You didn't even use one Sharpie on your makeup.
No, I didn't. And so it's just, it feels good to use these other products. It's just a matter of finding out about them and see how much you love them.
Okay, so what are some of the other things? Because I know today there's so many perfumes, an incredible number of perfumes being used today, and bubble baths and lotions and creams and all these body butters that are out there, right? Everyone's using them.
Anything that's scented needs to go.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Scented things, again, they're neurotoxins and they affect your brain. They affect all of your nervous system. If your nervous system is affected, everything in your body is affected.
You are never going to travel to France, are you, Debra?
Well, I'm not saying that every single thing that's scented is toxic, but what is toxic is the cheap artificial scents or even the expensive ones. The first person who made an artificial perfume was Coco Chanel.
Oh, that's discouraging. Coco did something like that?
Yeah. Chanel No. 5 was the first synthetic perfume, and prior to that, they were all made with natural essential oils.
Wow.
But Coco Chanel wanted something different that didn't smell like nature. She wanted it to be unique.
Oh, I see.
And this was just at the time when they started synthesizing these things.
Now, I know you talk about essential oils, and I love the fact that you can use essential oils for perfumes. They're medicinal. You can put them in your bath. You can put them on your sheets. You can put them on your pillow. I mean, you can come in contact with these. There are some that you can come in direct contact with and some that you can't. But what a better thing to use and more natural than all of these creams.
Yeah.
And you can even make your own.
And another thing is that when you use essential oils, not only are they not toxic, but aromatherapy, it has beneficial effects.
Right.
And so what I'm looking for are the things that are life-enhancing instead of life-damaging.
Okay, so if it says essential oils, that's okay? Am I right? Is it that simple?
If it says that it's scented with essential oils, like if you have a bottle of shampoo that says essential oil of lavender,
right,
then that's totally fine. What you don't want to use is something that says fragrance or perfume. That means it's synthetic.
Okay, so what about using all 100% organic? Because a lot of the products say organic, but it's not 100% organic. Should we be looking at products that are lotions, creams, bubble baths, whatever, that are 100% organic?
That's really the best. But I do want to say that whatever percentage of improvement that you can make, do it, because every bit counts.
I agree.
I'm wondering, going back to the essential oils, is it possible to have essential oils and they've also bundled in fragrant things that might be adverse?
It is possible. So you need to read the ingredients. There are this whole thing about natural and green and non-toxic products has become so popular that there are products that are. Everybody wants to be on the bandwagon. And so you have to watch for this now, because some products do combine organic ingredients with even toxic ingredients. And so it's okay with me if something isn't 100% organic, but I don't want organic ingredients mixed with toxic ingredients. And that's where we as consumers need to educate ourselves and really know what to look for. And that's a lot of what I talk about in my book and on my website. I'll give my website, DebraNontoxic.com, DebraNontoxic.com. There's a tremendous amount of information on there that's free. You can ask questions on my blog. I have a directory of websites, about 1,000 websites, where you can buy non-toxic products that I've already looked and checked them out. There's just so much information available that today it's not a question of can we be non-toxic. It's a choice to be non-toxic, because all the information is there, all the products is there. You could, if somebody wanted to, they could just throw out everything in their house, and I could come over and put non-toxic products in.
Wow.
And we just have it done just like that.
So obviously thinking about what you're putting on your body, what you're washing your clothes with. I know I just sent my daughter off to college, and I've always used an eco-friendly, 100% organic detergent, right? All of these years I've used it. But my daughter goes off to college and she uses, the one that's in the dorm, which is, has perfumes. I think it's like Tide plus whatever. And she has had a rash all over her body for 3 straight weeks. We finally just figured it out that it was the detergent. So I think a lot of these skin disorders that are going on and some of these issues that kids are having and adults are having could be something as simple as what you're washing your sheets or your clothes with.
Absolutely. It could be the formaldehyde finish on the shirt that's causing a rash. It could be the detergent. In fact, anything that's scented is very, very common to create skin rashes. So if anybody has a skin rash, another thing that is very common for skin rashes is chlorine in the shower water, or chloramines. I once had a friend, when I first discovered this, because I used to faint in the shower. And I figured out, and this was before the EPA came out with their report that says that the fumes coming off of a chlorinated shower are actually indoor air pollutants. But I used to faint in the shower. And so I had my father rig up he put on an undersink filter to remove chlorine. And now shower filters are being sold all over the place. But I had a friend who had a really bad rash, and she was putting like prescription drugs all over this rash. And I had my father hook up a filter for her too, and her rash went completely away.
Right. I think those are some of the simple things you can do. Change what you're washing your dishes with. Change what you're washing your clothes with.
Change the sheets on your bed.
Right.
Stop wearing perfume. Don't use Sharpie markers. Drink organic coffee. There's so many little things that you can start with.
Yes.
And what I did in my book was this is book number 7. And always in the past, I wanted to be absolutely complete about everything that I could find, and the books got bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's a whole website. But in this book, what I really wanted to do was kind of just say, everybody can do this. And I picked 50 things that I thought everybody could do. And they're simple things, they're inexpensive things, they're things that you could do on a Saturday afternoon. And one by one, even if you just wanted to take one a week, by the end of the year, you will have drastically reduced your toxic exposure.
I love that.
And that's all in your book?
Keeping it simple.
All 50 are in your book?
Toxic free.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about labels. You know, since we were talking about earlier, how much can you really trust the Food and Drug Administration and that kind of thing, as far as they can't investigate everything. Are you confident in the labels that you read, that what is printed by the manufacturer is actually there?
Yes.
I'm totally convinced now, Deborah. I could tell the way you answered that. I believe you.
So let me just tell you that there are laws in this country. The Federal Trade Commission says that if you say something on a product label, it's supposed to be true. But the problem that I see with product labels is far greater than people not telling the truth. The problem is that it's not required by law to actually list what's in the product for many, many products. Like, for example, we were talking about sheets. We'll just use that as an example. It should say what's in this product is cotton and formaldehyde and everything else. But it doesn't say that. It's not required. So you have to know that permanent press means formaldehyde. Now, another example I like to give is that if you go to the supermarket, you can buy a jar of applesauce that says apples and water and sugar. And then you go to the natural food store and buy applesauce and it says organically grown apples, filtered water. Well, what it should say is, at the supermarket, it should say apples and pesticides and chlorine and all the chemicals that are in that bottle. And at the natural food store, it should say apples and water.
Well, Debra, I'm confident if you keep working another 30 years on this, since you've already put in 30 years, that we're going to get that done. I'm confident that you will make that change where it will say what it is.
All right. Hey, Debra, it's been great talking with you. You know, I could see we could have a few chapters of this. Debra Lynn Dad, the author of Toxic Free, Nisha, with us with Ventana Wellness. Thank you.